Hi YouTube, my name is Daniel Lawrence with DR Lawrence and Associates. We are owners representatives and project management professionals that work specifically in the corporate real estate environment. And today we're going to talk to you guys about the 5 phases of a project and what happens in each one of those phases. And this is meant to be a brief overview. We're going to be using examples from the construction industry on these projects, particularly the corporate real estate side of running a construction project. However, these 5 phases can be applicable no matter what your industry is and no matter what project you're choosing to undertake. So let's get started. The first phase of any project is going to be your initiation phase. This is also known as the strategy phase. And in this phase, a lot of what's happening is really determining if we're going to have a project at all and the feasibility of that project and starting to get some of the strategy down on, all right, if we are going to have a project, what are we going to do as part of that project? So at this point in time, a lot of corporate real estate departments are looking at cost analysis. They're looking at the lease end dates that they've got for properties that are going to be coming up against the end of their lease. And they're doing it in a timely manner, usually a year or two ahead of those lease end dates, so that they can prepare and understand what they're going to be doing with that property, whether it's going to be something that goes into disposal, whether it's going to be something that goes into renewal, whether we go into a net new space or downsize that space and give back a portion of it. And there's a lot of cost modeling and things that happen internally to figure out what kind of project we're going to do if we're going to be doing a project at all. And so that's essentially the initiation or the strategy phase. Once a direction has been formulated and we understand, okay, now we do have a project, we're going to be moving into a new space, and then we're going to be decommissioning the existing space and giving that back to the landlord. So we know now that we're going to be having a construction project with a couple different elements, including a move and a decommission, which is fairly typical of the corporate real estate environment. Most projects, I think, fall under that purview. So during the planning phase, now that we've got that framework, we know kind of what we're going to be doing. Now we're going to start putting together essentially scope, schedule, and budget. We're going to be looking at test fits. We're going to be looking at various space plans. There's going to be different types of site selections. They know they may be moving into a new building, but which one are we going to move to and what are we going to do there? And again, scope, schedule, budget really start to come into play during the planning phase. So once we've got an option of maybe moving into one space, we can start looking at the different elements, what's going to be needed as far as furniture, security, your audio visual, your artwork, whatever it is, all the different elements that go into a commercial space. We're starting to put that together. We're also putting together a schedule and taking into account a number of different critical dates that may be affecting the schedule. In particular, a lease end date is probably one of the biggest ones, because we know we need to be able to renovate a new space, move the client over into that newly renovated space, and then decommission or give back their existing space before that lease end date hits, so that the client doesn't end up being in holdover and getting charged more money or having to rent the space longer. Or in some cases, the landlord might even have a tenant that's lined up afterwards and they got to get out. There's no option for that. So in order to truly mitigate risk, that's now what we're doing here in the planning phase, is putting together that framework of the project, again, scope, schedule, and budget. And then along with that, also getting funding before we can jump into the design phase and start bringing on some of our partners. And that's done again with scope, schedule, and budget, coming up with ROM pricing, and then getting client approval for how much money we have that we can spend to execute this project. So that's really what signifies going into the design phase, is we've got that framework put together and we've got funding. So now we can start taking a little bit more action and getting into the design phase, where we're going to be bringing on our architects on a little bit more heavy basis. We're going to be going through SD and DDs, which is schematic design and design drawings, and starting to really put together the instructions, if you will, to be able to actually execute upon later once we have all of the other project partners in place. And even during this design process, we're going to be doing several things simultaneously. One of them is going through and developing the drawings much more closely. We're going to be doing site visits so that we can look at the existing conditions of the site a little bit more closely so that those drawings can get developed and get developed to a T with minimal issues down the line once we've got our vendors and we get into the phase where we've got boots on the ground over an execution. We're starting to do our procurement as well during this time. We're coordinating with a lot of our vendors that we're going to bring onto the project with our general contractors and whoever. We're going through the bidding process as part of that procurement phase, collecting our bids, sharing the drawings, sharing the scopes, getting questions asked and answered, and awarding contracts. We're also coordinating with landlords so that they know what the expectations are and that they can also approve the drawing sets before that they get in for permit. And we're submitting for permits also once that happens as well. So again, during the design phase, we're not just designing, but we're also going through procurement. We're bringing on all of our vendor partners. We're making sure that we have access requirements and all of those little boxes checked to be able to actually get our boots on the ground and start building out this project. And with that then takes us into the fourth phase of a project, which is execution. And during a construction project with the execution phase, again, we've got our general contractors that are on the ground, boots on the ground. They may have to do some demolition work to the space first. Then they're starting to actually build up the space with the construction and with all the materials that are coming in. They're going to be using freight elevators and things of that nature. So it's all the action on the ground is what's happening during the execution phase of a project. This is also closely followed by, and in some cases integrated with, your ancillary vendors. So your IT teams, your security teams, your audiovisual teams, your art and furniture teams, all of those elements that are part of building an office space. It either start integrating towards the end of the construction phase or are integrated directly as soon as construction is completed. You have certificate of occupancy or substantial completion. Every project is going to vary depending on what the needs and the specifics are around that certain project. The other thing that is part of the execution phase as well is not just the construction and all of the elements and boots on the ground that is part of the new space that you may be moving into. But as you recall, I mentioned earlier in this video that there are also the move elements. So actually coordinating the move of all of the employees that are in that space from one office to another, making sure you have movers hired and all of those things, access requirements, all of that. Making sure that you've got mail setups, working with your facilities management team, the IT, all that stuff is working and in place. And then also you've got that existing space that needs to get decommissioned, and the decommission requirements are always going to be in the lease, but there also is some close coordination with the landlords that are required to make sure that we're leaving that space and exiting that space in acceptable condition, and that the landlord does accept it back in the way that we turn it over to that landlord. So once all of that is done and we've actually executed the project, so the construction, the move, as well as any decommission portions, then we get into the final phase of a project, and that's closeout. And closeout phase is going to be very documentation heavy. This is when we're making sure we're getting all of the final invoices in, that all of the contracts are reconciled with the invoices, that there's no money that's left on the table or in open contracts and any issues like that. We're able to get all those buttoned up. We're making sure that we get lien waivers and all of our final closeout documentations or as-built, things of that nature that need to be on file going forward. We're also making sure that we've got TIA dollars, if there are any applicable to a project. We've got all that package put together and sent off to the landlord so that the client can get the tenant improvement dollars that are outlined in the lease. And then we're also making sure that any little warranty items or any little day two things that come up are buttoned up through the closeout period. And then we can close a project. That's all she wrote. In some cases, you may have a warranty walk that you schedule, maybe 11 months down the line after substantial completion, just to make sure that any little warranty items are caught before it expires, so that you can give your client the best product, the highest quality, with the longest potential lifespan that you can. And then that's it. So those are the 5 phases of a project. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, please remember to click like and subscribe, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.